Salut tout le monde, comment ça va? My name is Alex. If you have not been to my channel before, I am an expat living in the south of France for the last 5 years, turned French coach for English speakers. And I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Diane, and she has been an expat in France for even longer than me. I think it's going on 8 years, or maybe it's just been the 8 year mark. So before I let Diane introduce herself, today we're going to be talking about the three big things that we commonly do as French learners which slow down our progress and stop us getting to that fluency point, essentially make our lives a lot harder, that we need to stop doing. And what better guest to have than someone who has been there, done that, just like myself. So Diane, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, salut tout le monde. I'm Diane, as Alex said. Thank you so much for having me. And I've been in France since 2012. I blog over at weinfrance.com. It's a living abroad lifestyle blog. And I also have a YouTube channel where we talk about everyday life and beyond. I do a little bit of language learning, French culture topics and observations. And I've also done a bunch of behind the scenes where I take you to a bakery in the middle of the night, a chocolate shop, an organic winemaker. So have a look at my channel. But thank you again, Alex.
Yeah, so guys, just so you know, Diane and I have also done a video over on her channel all about 6 expressions that we only learned when we came to France and that are very everyday expressions that you need to learn. So go ahead and check that out at the end of this video. The links will be down below in the description, as well as links to all Diane's profiles everywhere that she is on the internet.
Thank you.
So, numéro un, the first thing on our list of things that we do as French learners that just massively slow down our progress on our route to being confident French speakers is worrying far too much about our accent and or pronunciation in French. And I know, Diane, you have quite a bit that you want to say about this, so I'm going to let you go first, and then
Okay.
we can chat about it.
Yeah, so I think something that differentiates us as a foreigner in French right off the bat is that from the moment we open our mouths, we have an accent. Even people who speak French fluently, bilingual, started in their teens and college, will have an accent. And let me say right out of the gate, an accent is not a defect. It means you speak more than one language. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is something that might make you feel self-conscious, might cause people to ask you follow-up questions. Where are you from? Oh, you have an accent. So if you're sensitive about your language skills, the accent can throw you off. And we find ourselves focusing on that, saying, oh, I want to reduce my accent. I don't want to have an accent. But always ask yourself, am I understood? Because working on your pronunciation is one thing, and I think that's super important. If you are not understood, people are asking you to repeat yourself a lot, that means you need to work on your pronunciation. That's valid. But your accent, if you think of it as something you need to fix or erase, I don't know that that always serves you well, because that's like a piece of you. And in most times, even if you try to repeat after your French spouse, in my case, after you try to repeat something that a French person said, you're not going to nail it. But are you understood? Absolutely. And most of the time people think an accent is charming. It's a differentiator. It's charming though. And it's something that kind of identifies you. So absolutely work on your pronunciation, especially if you are not understood. And a good judge of that is, are people saying, come on? Are they looking at you like, hold on, what did they say? But they're being too polite to ask. If you're finding that people do not understand you, surely work on your pronunciation, work with Alex on that. But an accent in and of itself is not a problem. So just my thoughts on that. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, and I think it's really great that you differentiate between pronunciation and accent, because a lot of people get the two mixed up. You can very much have a good pronunciation in French, but have a very clear accent that shows that you're not
Yeah.
from here. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, case in point, some people around here, or a lot of people around here in Montpellier, French people that is, they have a very strong southern accent. And even if you're quite new to French, you'll hear it. It's very distinctive. But do they have a
Yeah.
bad pronunciation? No, not at all. So yeah, like you said, unless people are like pointing out to you either indirectly or directly that they don't understand what you're saying, then you're doing fine. And I say on this channel all the time, se faire comprendre is the first and most important thing, goal
100%.
for when you're speaking. So to be
Yeah.
understood, like you said, and yeah, work on it if you have had it confirmed that you need to work on it. But yeah, you get by, and then work on the little things later.
And the perfectionist in me thinks, okay, well, there's so much I don't know about grammar, vocabulary, all this stuff. Well, damn it, I just want to have a good accent. So I'm going to spend an hour a day in my accent. When really that's not serving me well, because an accent is just one aspect of so many when it comes to understanding a language and thriving in it when you're living in a place. And I kind of regret focusing on my accent. Yeah, I have an accent, but I have good pronunciation, right? So it's, yeah, great, but what did it get me? I would have been better served by maybe focusing on grammar that still to this day I don't know very well, or certain things that maybe I should have spent time on 5 years ago that now I'm like, oh, it's too late, I'm just gonna focus on something else. So it's like, yeah, if you're a perfectionist, just try to take a step back and think, all right, are people understanding me? Good. Brush that off and work on something else that's going to actually elevate your level, because you could be a terrible French speaker and read something in French with a very minor accent, but the minute someone talks to you face to face, you're like, what did they say? Maybe speaking, working on comprehension would be time better spent. Just like there are people with super heavy English accents in French, but they're perfectly bilingual. When they write something, it's like a native speaker. So again, an accent in and of itself is not an indicator of your level of French. So working on it, sure, work on it. But if there's other things you need to work on, like pronunciation or comprehension, make that your focus.
Yeah, for sure. And it is, and believe us, guys, like we do sympathize. We know that it's a tough balance to know what to work on when, because I mean, goodness, you have the four main skills, and you think, well, okay, but I want to improve my pronunciation, but I need to improve the grammar as well. I need to understand people in the street better. How can I work on all that? And
Yeah, and your
and
head's
I
like,
really do sympathize and empathize, because I've definitely been there. But what I say to my students is, you got to take things one thing at a time, and it doesn't mean you're going to not learn to improve your listening for the next 3 months while you work on your pronunciation. Maybe work on something 7 days at a time. Have a specific target that you work on really in a focused way for 7 days. You see the progress, move on to the next thing, and it's this constant balancing act. But you can make your life a lot easier and feel better by just doing things 1 week at a time, I found anyway. Cool. So Diane, do you want to lead us into the second point?
yeah. So number two is something that's going to hold you back and keep you from progressing, just kind of taking your eye off the ball of moving forward, is spending a ton of time learning specialized vocabulary that you're not going to use. So by all means, if you're, I don't know, a veterinary student, and in French, you need to learn like the whole anatomy of animals. Of course, you're going to need those specialized words for your profession, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, picking up a French dictionary or a grammar book and learning vocabulary that you're maybe going to use once a year. And I just feel like sometimes, yes, that's great that you know the word for, I don't know, I can't even think of a random word right now, like patella, a dog's patella. Rotule is the word, actually. I know that because, anyway, but if you're going to use the word, fine. But if it's a word that's just random that you're just adding to your repertoire, maybe it's not the best thing to focus on. And what you can do is when you get better at French and you have no trouble communicating, you're talking to someone, you realize you come up against a word you don't know, you just say, ah, je suis désolé, je connais pas le mot pour, tu sais, les trucs dans le genou qui bouge, une articulation, like you just kind of explain, like it's that thing in the knee, it's a os, a bone, and they'll say, oh, the rotule, and you're like, exactly, the rotule, of course, and you could kind of have French people feed you the words. So you don't need to know every word under the sun. And I just feel like, and I'm only mentioning this because these are all mistakes that I've made. I don't know about you, Alex, but I'm perfectly fine admitting that. And the one thing when I came to France that I did majorly wrong was I was fine with textbook learning. At that time, my reading and my written comprehension was way stronger than my oral. When I would get in front of actual French people, they would speak to me and it would just be a jumble of sounds. For a good year and a
You
half,
felt like
2
you went
years,
back to
I
being a
was
beginner all
so
over again.
nervous. I would literally give people a pen and paper and say, je suis désolé, je n'ai pas compris le troisième mot que vous avez dit. Est-ce que vous pouvez l'écrire, s'il vous plaît? And they'd be like, what? And they'd write it. And I said, oh, of course that's what you said. But, with the liaison between the words, I just wasn't registering the words. So for me, I would have been better served by focusing on oral comprehension, watching TV, actually speaking to French people. But what did I do? I buried my head in a book and I learned dog's anatomy. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's such a it's such a mind game. At least in my experience, it's been what is easiest and makes me feel like I'm being busy and improving my French, and what is
Yeah,
actually
that's what it is.
something that I need to do because I know that's a problem. And a lot of time, we rationalize the reasons for being busy, but we know deep down that that's not exactly what we should work on, because the last time you came up against someone in the street who asked you for directions, you completely clammed up and didn't know what the hell to say, and you felt like all of that stuff in your head didn't count for shit, excuse my French, because you couldn't perform on that time. And it's a funny example, but it's very apt, the one you give about learning vocabulary for parts of dogs. I mean, it's very niche, but a lot of us do that in different ways. We'll learn stuff that it just is not relevant to not just now, but to just our interests and what we're going to need in the future. Because we're so used to that textbook learning, and even allowing resources, books, apps, podcasts, whatever, to do the learning for us in a way. They'll define what you should learn based on a curriculum. And I feel like what's even more important for expats than people living outside the country is to really get a handle on what it is that you need to move forward when you're beyond that beginner stage, what you need to move forward, because the challenge is in front of you every single day. And if you keep ignoring the real challenges, i.e. being more comfortable in those situations where you need to talk to a stranger, or someone outside of a learning environment, that you're never going to improve it, or you're going to improve it very slowly with a lot of stress. So focus on the language you need to get onto tasks that come up in your everyday life, you know?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said, Alex. You nailed it. It's all about, realizing, oh, I'm not great at speaking and I can't really improve that in 10 minutes, but you know what? Let me get my book, learn vocabulary, boom, boom, boom. Ah, I just learned 5 words. Great. Pat on the back. I just
Oh,
learned five
yeah,
words,
learn five
and,
words.
and
Yeah.
it, exactly. And then it's like you freeze up when you have to give directions, but it's like sometimes mentally you can't, it's not that you can't admit, but you don't want to come to the reality that, oh crap, I can't understand people in real life very well. And I feel so bad. It's going to take so much work. Let me do something easy, learn 5 words that maybe I don't really need. And I feel like I did something today. Yay, me. And I'll just give another example. I think before I left, I was in like a B1 French class at Alliance Française. And it was like a low level intermediate. As I said, the focus was on writing, reading. I was not good at understanding. And there was this guy in our class who was much better at speaking, maybe not better, but he just had all this confidence. But we didn't even realize the mistakes he was making because we were just like super jealous, but we're like, did he really just say that big sentence? Like, wow. And he would say things like, oui, je vais à la Belgique demain. And we were like, wow, he's going to Belgium. And then we realized, oh, it's je vais en Belgique. La Belgique is maintenant, but basically he was like saying things completely wrong grammar. But to us, we were like in awe of how he could speak. And it's like, wow, maybe we should have been more like him, busted out a la instead of en, and not worried about that. But at the time, it was like, nope, we want to be right. We want to learn stuff. We did our level, boom, and if I had known then that I would have ended up in France, maybe I would have been a little more confident in a classroom setting to bust out my mistakes, because trust me, it is so much easier to kind of get things wrong when you're in the comfort of your teacher and your fellow students who kind of get where you're coming from. In real life in France, when you say something and mess it up and they don't understand you, they're just going to move on to someone else or walk away or laugh at you. Like, honestly, it's not a great feeling when you're an adult. You're not an 18-year-old student getting like looked at funny. It just like shrinks you down. And if you care about that stuff, which a lot of us do, I think if you're watching this, it can be really nerve-wracking to say the least.
Yeah, and another point that isn't in this video, but something very important to touch on, is we shouldn't compare ourselves to others. And I'm not going to go deeper into it now, but like you talking about the guy in your class who, at the time, you thought, oh my goodness, he speaks so well. And later you find, oh, actually, he's making this mistake, and to a French person, it probably doesn't sound great, but he had the fluidity and he had the confidence. You are you do you. You're on your trajectory. Just the best thing you can do is realize what you need to move forward and work on that, and don't ignore it, and you'll be good. Okay, so on to number 3, which is worrying too much about intricate grammar, which just isn't going to move you forward right now. You think the next thing that I need to learn in terms of grammar is, say, the subjunctive. And, I've got to learn that. And then you realize how huge a topic the subjunctive is that you kind of forget to realize what's important right now. And that is not just getting by, but that there are other things more important to master at your current stage than trying to learn subjunctive 100%, because that is just too much to put on your plate. Diane, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I feel like this kind of falls into the category of learning a bunch of random vocab words. Grammar is important. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but to try to learn something that's so complicated that even French speakers mess up, or something, a construction with an obscure conjugation that you're going to use once a year, maybe time could be better spent on speaking. I keep going back to that because that is the most important thing. If you find yourself in France beyond just a 1 week vacation, you need to be able to speak, and you need to understand people speaking to you. So anything that you're going to spend time on that takes you away from that, if you're not at a solid, I would say a solid B1 level, if you're not there yet with comprehension and understanding, anything that's going to take you away from that for more than an hour or two, or let's say 20% of your learning, I feel is not necessary, because it doesn't matter what complicated grammar you could use after you've thought about it for 30 seconds. Because you know what, when the person's in front of you and you need to bust it out, it's still going to be in your back pocket. And I'm talking about, constructions like would have had, should have, could have. You stress on those, and maybe you should put just a little bit of time into that, and then you'll realize with time it comes naturally. Because when you're out talking and working on comprehension, you'll hear them used naturally in the wild, so to speak, and it'll just become natural to you to say j'aurais fait, or I don't know, just things like that. You know what I mean? So I just feel that learning very, very intricate grammar that you're not going to use very often maybe is something you should spend less time on, and more time somewhere else. And for me personally, and again, I don't have an amazing handle on grammar because it hasn't been where I put my focus, but little things have come in waves. Now, you just know when to use the imparfait. Like si plus clauses, like you say, si j'avais su, if I had known. At first I'm like, si j'avais, si j'ai su, and now I'm just like, I know if I'm going to say, oh, well, if I had known, I would have called you or something. And I know I start si j'avais su, but if I need to use the il form or something else, you need to think about it more. And I feel like that thinking time gets reduced little by little as you go on to speak and hear people. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, Alex.
Absolutely, and it's just taking me back to so many memories, and even some are more recent than others. Believe me, guys, because this really is a marathon, not a sprint. And we're not saying that if you just stop worrying about complex grammar, everything gets easy. It gets easier, and you just gotta play the game and see the path of, I wouldn't say path of least resistance. That's the complete wrong thing to say. But you've got to figure out what it is you need to be able to have a comfortable conversation. Notice things that you found tricky. Work on that. Things that come up regularly. Work on that. Move that out of your backlog of French grammar to work on, and then work on the next thing. Things like you talked about, could have had, should have had. I mean, that's so complex. If you don't notice it coming up a lot, then it's probably not worth worrying about making it a priority right now. But one thing I would say that you reminded me of in the last point, you talked about the guy being impressive with his phrases. You can also just learn things as big chunks. So don't try and learn the logic and the complex grammar and piece it all together. That can be really slow and painful. It's great when you get it, but whatever stage you're at, if you want to learn something that sounds quite advanced, but you've needed it recently, just learn the whole sentence as a block, and then just get it out as much as possible.
Like il faut que je vienne. Il faut que je vienne instead of je viens. It's not the present. You're actually using the subjunctive there. Yeah. Why? Don't even worry about it if that's just too much down the rabbit hole. Just know if you're starting with il faut que, then you need a je and a vienne.
Yeah, and being in France is kind of really, and I use this word like hammered me down to accept I can't be a perfectionist, because I really love the details. But having
Yeah.
to live here has taught me that I really have to find a balance, and I struggle with it every day. Like with the il faut que, like, yeah, now I will just find myself sometimes saying things, following a rule that I didn't know I'd properly learned, but I have
Hmm.
definitely gone and looked it up at some point. But yeah, things that come up all the time, like il faut que j'y aille. Il faut que j'y aille, you're
Hmm.
like, okay, is yeah, what is that? You don't worry about it. Just remember that is what the French say, and when you spend enough time here and you hear it, you're gonna start repeating them. I think that's something that a lot of us don't do enough, is actually keep our ears open, not worry so much about every word that's coming out of our mouth, and just mimic the French people, and then you can think
Yeah.
later about what and why was that, unless you really are a huge grammar geek like me and then you want to look it up. But pick your battles wisely and don't stay in the books for too long.
And just an analogy that popped into my head, Alex, while you were speaking, it's kind of like wanting to prepare a beautiful meal, and having, the ingredients to make a beautiful cake. So you have your butter, you have your flour, you have your eggs, but you don't have the recipe that tells you how to put them all together to actually finish up with a cake. So you have everything you need, you just don't know how to use it. And for me, that relates to, intricate grammar is the eggs, random vocabulary is the flour. But unless we have that recipe of practice communicating, actually speaking and being understood, it doesn't matter everything you know in the book learning, because it's just going to stay in your back pocket, and you're going to be like, oh yes, I'm talking to this guy and there's this sentence I want to say, let me think about it. And by the time you've thought about it, you've just missed 30 seconds of what he's talking about, and the moment's passed, because that grammar, yeah, you know it, but you can't bust it out in real time yet. But it will come, I promise you that. If you're like, oh gosh, I know the imparfait, but I don't know the conjugation off the top of my head, or, oh, I need to say I would have gone, but oh man, I still need to think about that. It will come. I think the first 2 years here, it was just a blur of sounds and me trying to get up to speed with comprehension. And now my reading and written French has gone by the wayside because I focus on speaking. And now I could bust out, j'aurais dû faire, I should have done something, or whatever. J'aurais dû, il aurait fait, I could say them with ease now. I don't need to think like he would have done this or whatever, or the si j'avais su before. It's just, again, remembering the words. Maybe if you don't even know how to write it yet, listen to what people say and how they use things, and with time it will come. So give yourself grace on that, because I'm a pretty kind of relaxed person when it comes to certain things, but sometimes I'm a perfectionist too. And I get in my head about wanting to be really good at something, realizing that I'm not as good as I want to be, and then thinking I've already failed at it, and then not wanting to try anymore. And that doesn't help. It doesn't help you improve at all. And it's a mindset to not get into, because I've been there, especially when other things in my life maybe haven't been great. And it's just one more thing to add to the list of crap that you just don't want to deal with. So I think, Alex, I think your content is really good at kind of dealing with those blocks, those mindsets that some people probably don't deal with. The guy going to Belgium in my French class, he doesn't care. Like, he's literally said, I don't care if I mess up the grammar, at least I can talk. It's like, okay, guy, yeah, you can. But some of us kind of go about it differently. So yeah, really appreciate what you do, Alex, and the mindset stuff.
And thank you very much. And I've got a few things to comment on what you said there.
Good.
But the if I remember, but the guy in your French class, he will have impressed people, and he would have definitely done better earlier on because he'd have just been speaking. He'd have got by, especially if he's going to live in a French speaking country. He's going to need it, right?
Right?
But later on, if he gets to 4, 5, 6 years or more in France, and his grammar is still terrible, but he's fluid, people aren't going to like that either. They're going to start hearing him, and he's not going to be, whether you care about what people think or not. I think we all do. In some way, and you want to know that you're speaking well at some point, and if your grammar is terrible after several years, so you got to find that balance. The other thing you said about the analogy was great about making making a cake, and I would say whenever you start baking for the first time, those first couple of cakes are never going to be anywhere near as good as that 10th one. So, but you can't make that 10th one without doing the first 9. So you've just got to accept that you're going to make a terrible cake. the first time, and it will be an average cake fifth time, you know, etc. It's going to get better. And with French speaking, it's harder because you have to put yourself out there and speak to another person. You've got all these things in your head, your ego. That's a big part of it, is our egos. Even if we're not narcissists, you know, we all have an ego and we all want to make a good impression and look good. And it's really hard for us to accept that we need to speak simply. And we can't help but feel like we're going back to a child state of speaking, or maybe even caveman speaking. But the more you accept that you can do that, and that's okay, and not just that, but you need to do that to get further, you're going to want to speak more often, and therefore you're going to speak more often, therefore you're going to get more fluid, and then you can integrate the increasing your level of grammar as you go through. And one final thing I want to say about this is, even if you live in French-speaking country and you feel like the challenge is quite overwhelming sometimes, and you think, oh my goodness, I want to work on this, but all of these other things keep popping up in everyday life, the thing I would say to you is to have something stable in your life that is dedicated towards practicing the French that you want to practice, i.e. with a tutor or with a coach or with a language exchange partner that's focused on stuff that you can work on, that allows you to work on what you want to work on. Then all those other things that pop up in your daily life, they're always going to come up, but they're going to have less of an impact on you because you know, though, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when you have those classes or that exchange, that is where you can work on stuff that you know is important for your level and your life tasks right now, and then you can integrate those improvements into those random interactions in the street or having to go to the bank. You'll notice that you're more comfortable and more confident because you'll have practiced in a more comfortable setting. So I think that's all we have for these 3 points. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, it was a wonderful discussion. I want to have more of these on the channel. So hopefully I'll get you back sometime sooner rather than later. We could do a part 2.
I'll come to Montpellier. I have business down there anyway, so.
Yeah, so yeah, guys, like Diane said at the top of the video, or I said at the top of the video, I can't remember. We've done another video over on her channel, all about expressions that we didn't learn until we got to France. So that's a really great list over there. So go and check that out now. The link is down in the description, along with links to where you can find Diane at We in France. Hit the like button if you appreciated it. Really helps me get the video out into the eyeballs of more French learners like yourselves. But merci beaucoup, Diane.
Merci beaucoup à toi.
Et à la prochaine, tout le monde. Merci beaucoup d'avoir regardé. Ciao.
Salut.